the water. And I've developed different recording techniques that allow me to capture these environments in surround sound and capture aspects of these environments that are beyond what we traditionally hear. I've always been really fascinated by this idea that as humans, we only have access to a tiny amount of sound that exists in the world. So other species are hearing above and below our ranges in ultrasonic and infrasonic range, and around us all right now are all these incredible soundscapes that we can't actually hear. So I've been fascinated by this idea for many years, and so all of my work is really revolving around this idea of looking at ways that we can inspire people to listen to the environment, to connect with our physical environment through sound, but then use these virtual and augmented experiences to travel and traverse different environments. Now, a lot of this has been about immersing people in these surround sound installations with multiple speakers, so using 32 speakers that surround the audience. But obviously it's not always physically possible to do that. So about a decade ago, I started to really look at the possibilities of mobile technologies, these devices that most of us are now constantly carrying in our pockets every day. And I was quite fascinated by a lot of the research around environmental interconnection was kind of suggesting that these devices are the reason why we're so disconnected to the environment. I constantly see images like this at climate change conferences where people are saying if we can take mobile phones away from young people, then we can reconnect them to the environment. So my work has more been exploring how can we use mobile technologies, particularly VR and AR, to reconnect people to the environment as opposed to disconnect people. And much of this work all began right here in Noosa. And the start of this was about using locative media, so GPSing spatial sounds in the environment and positioning those in different places, and then using your phone to walk through and trigger those spatial soundscapes. So as the user, you basically become the composer. And one of these pieces which I explored a lot of the new technologies in was called Wirra, which was presented at Floating Land 2015, commissioned by Noosa Regional Gallery. And this piece was the first AR work that used live streaming hydrophones, so live soundscapes beneath the surface of the Noosa River. As you walked closer to the river, those live soundscapes were mixed into the piece. And as you walked along the riverbank, you essentially had a geolocated story of the history of Floating Land. You heard the voices from artists over the last decade, weave together with the voices of people like Brent Miller, who we heard from this morning, and Lyndon Davis, local Gubbi Gubbi artists, talking about the history of this area in local language. So this piece, since being in Noosa as this river listening augmented reality experience, has toured to various river systems across the world. It's been presented in Los Angeles and New York in the context of different festivals. But it's always a great pleasure to bring this work back to Noosa because much of this was all generated here well over a decade ago through a project called Sonic Babylon, which was pioneered by two New York-based artists, William Duckworth and Nora Farrell, and who sadly are no longer with us now. But they pioneered the very first technologies in spatial sound and augmented reality. And this basically enabled you to create this Wi-Fi sound garden using Wi-Fi routers to trigger different soundscapes in the environment and create these interactive stories that the community could control. And so it's kind of exciting to think that this was one of the first projects that pioneered this technology, and it was presented right here in Noosa, supported by Noosa Regional Gallery, and the first library that it was presented at in the world was actually Karoi Library. So I've always been really inspired by this idea that Noosa is kind of a pioneer in augmented reality technologies, especially from the perspectives of some of these things. So at the time, Sonic Babylon was quite ahead of how we could interact with these technologies. You could plant and prune these sounds, but realistically at the time, not everyone was carrying around a smartphone. So it was difficult to be able to generate that community engagement. And I had the pleasure of working with Bill and Nora on a range of iterations of Sonic Babylon here in Australia and internationally. And I've been really passionate about how we can find ways to make this technology more accessible for communities. So I've worked on a range of apps in the last decade. I've collaborated on some of these. I've used some existing platforms and developed some of these myself. And this all worked towards Aurality, which is a new augmented reality audio platform I launched this year. And I'm going to talk about that at the close of this presentation, but first I just want to give you a little bit of background about some of these projects and the technology behind them. So basically, the core idea of these augmented reality audio experiences is connecting people to urban environments through these spatial, immersive soundscapes and stories. So it connects to the cultural and biological diversity of an environment. We're merging these scientific field recordings with interactive storytelling. And as an example, this is an image of Sandy Sir, who is a community chief from the Luatin community in Vanuatu, who's had quite a long relationship with Noosa through floating land. And this is Sandy listening to a GPS-located story of his community in Luatin at the mouth of Noosa River. And he's looking out towards Vanuatu and hearing the stories and sounds of his community. And for Sandy, he found this technology to be natural. The idea that sound, a spatial surround sound soundscape, would be connected to the environment seemed very intuitive to him. So I've been really inspired by the synchronicity between what augmented reality and immersive technologies present in being able to collaborate with Indigenous communities as well. This is an example at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Nianta Spellman, the Director of Rainforest Partnership, and Steve Adler, the Mayor of Austin, Texas, listening to the sounds of the Amazon rainforest. And for Nianta, she directs this organisation that works directly with Indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest, but she's struggled to find ways to connect people in Austin with the importance of rainforest conservation. It wasn't until she started using creative technologies and working with artists that she was able to inspire many organisations in Austin to support the incredible work they're doing with Indigenous communities in the Amazon. And as the next iteration of that, we took this to Times Square in New York and mapped the central Amazon rainforest over Times Square. These were interactive spatial soundscapes merged with stories from communities. And so you used your mobile phone to walk through Times Square and immerse yourself in that incredible complexity of the Amazon rainforest. Now, obviously, that's a huge contrast to the multi-sensory overload that you usually have in Times Square. But this gave people, in the context of Climate Week, this complete immersion in one of the environments that we were talking about. So when we're at these big climate change events, we're not often having the opportunity to immerse ourselves in these environments at the core of the discussion. Whereas, as we heard in the panel earlier, VR and AR gives us these incredible tools to bring these environments to people. For COP21 in Paris, we took this one step further and mapped not just the Amazon rainforest, but different layers, the 4 distinctive layers of tropical rainforest vegetation over the Eiffel Tower. So delegates at COP21 could do their usual Eiffel Tower tourism, but download this app and access these spatial and interactive soundscapes from the rainforest. And I did these recordings in the Amazon about 6 or 7 years ago and put a number of people through hell wanting to rig hydrophones in the canopy. Didn't really know what I was going to do with it at that point in time, but I'm very happy that we ended up being able to map those sounds to the Eiffel Tower. So this is very much about being able to sculpt these sounds based on how we move, really giving the audience, the listeners, agency in this process. And what also inspires me about these technologies, which was touched on in the last panel, is we can take this directly to people. This is the Queensland Science Minister listening to the sounds of the Great Barrier Reef at the opening of World Science Festival. And it's as part of the Sonic Reef project, which allows you to be immersed in the Great Barrier Reef and actually experience what it would feel like if an Adani ship came past, if you were a humpback whale there. So it means that I would have a tough time getting someone like our Science Minister to a performance or an exhibition, But in this kind of experience, I can actually put this directly in her hands and on her ears. Now, in parallel to all of this work, I've been doing a lot of composition for virtual reality as well, that has a very strong environmental focus. And a lot of this has been based on freshwater and marine environments, but instead of dive into some of these projects, what I want to do is give you a very short crash course on spatial audio. And now Chris, when we were chatting about this, mentioned that this is really about inspiring people to get into this technology. And a lot of people say to me, oh, you know, the visuals are very exciting, but do we really need to, you know, record original sound or compose original sound? And so what I want to do is just give you a very quick crash course just to show you how easy this technology really is at this point in time. So there's two very common techniques for spatial audio, and the first one is very simple. It's called binaural recording. How many people in the room have heard of binaural recording? A few of you, excellent, that's good. So this is basically, in a very simple format, recording exactly the same way we hear. So often human ears are used, and not actual human ears, the shape of human ears are used, and the shape of a human head to mirror exactly how we hear in the environment. It's a technique that's been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of devices commercially available that you can buy to create binaural sound very easy. And this is a great technique for VR and AR because it makes you feel present. It makes you feel like you're actually in that environment. 3DO have been really pioneering this technology. This is a commercially available binaural microphone. It's about $2,000. It's very good quality, but there's a whole range of more accessible devices that have come out recently. There's a lot of earbuds available now that allow you to both listen to binaural sound and record binaural sound. And we've been experimenting with DIY technologies as well. So this is the exact same capsules as the 3DO, which you can buy for £8 in the UK. And this is a 3D printed ear. And we've done comparisons and it sounds exactly the same. So you can actually print this at Officeworks for about $5 and buy these capsules and make your own binaural microphones. 3DO may sue me at some point in time, but it's very accessible technology and a lot of people are custom making their own binaural rigs for VR and AR now. Now, the other very popular technique for immersive environments is ambisonic recording. How many of you have heard of ambisonic recording? A few less, but still some, that's good. So ambisonic is basically recording a full sphere of sound. So what that means is you have 4 microphone capsules and it's allowing you to record not just left and right in traditional recording, but actually above and below as well. So you're getting that full sphere of sound. Now, when we're talking about immersive environments, it's a no-brainer that ambisonic recording is the best sound recording technique we could use. There's a range of commercially available microphones. Soundfield have been pioneers in this area for many years. Their microphones are exceptional quality and they allow you to feel like you're truly present in those environments. These are quite expensive. They can range from $6,000 to $8,000. We've had companies such as Core Mic, the Tetra mic, that have made more accessible mics for around $1,000, not quite as good quality. And then in the last 2 years, we've seen this influx of different organisations across the world building these kind of microphones. Brahma in India made a beautiful ambisonic microphone that's a lot more affordable. And last year, Sennheiser brought out the Ambio, which is kind of game-changing for VR, and they targeted this directly at VR. They're calling it their VR mic. I highly recommend this microphone. It's excellent quality. In Australia, it's around about $2,000. So if you're thinking, look, we don't want to invest quite that much at this stage, there's a lot more devices available that are very accessible. This is the Zoom H2. I've got one right here, and you can play with it after if you want to. This is about $200. It has 4 microphone capsules and an inbuilt recorder. So it's incredibly easy to use. You basically turn it on and hit record. It's very small, so you can actually install it under your VR camera and it doesn't interfere with the shot. It's obviously not the world's greatest quality for $200, but it's very good quality. And so a lot of VR producers contact me and say, well, we really want sound for this, but we don't want spatial sound because that's too expensive. We've just got some shotgun mics and things. But when we've got devices like this available, there's really no excuse for not being able to do spatial audio in VR because they're so accessible and they're getting cheaper by the day. And if you want to go one step easier, Soundfield and Rode have collaborated on a new onboard camera mic where you've got a tiny little ambisonic mic, so still the 4 capsules, and you can plug this straight into your camera. And again, this is creating a full sphere of sound, so it's giving you exactly the same access, and this will install straight to 360 cameras as well. So if you're thinking, well, that's great, but what on earth do I do with all of these ambisonic files once I've recorded them? All of these microphones come with great platforms that enable you to use these files in a very easy way. So instead of working with 1 channel or 2 channel, you have 4 audio channels, and there's lots of very easy to use platforms that let you edit this and manipulate it in exactly the same way you would with any audio file. This one is an exceptional one, Harpex, that lets you visualize sound. And then very recently, we've started to see an influx of all the big game players releasing spatial audio platforms. Facebook released Facebook 360, which is free software designed specifically for spatial audio for 360 video. And there's some fantastic tools on here, free, that are very easy to use. So I'd really encourage you to explore those. And then just a few days ago, Google released Resonance Audio, which completely changes the game with ambisonics. This is again, free to use platform. There's some amazing tools in there that completely simplify this process. And so this is basically a multi-platform spatial audio SDK, software development kit, that is really designed to streamline this process of spatial audio for AR and VR. And it simulates how sound waves interact with human ears and their environment. And this is available to be integrated with all of the existing platforms. If you're using Unity or if you're working with mobiles and Android or iOS, Resonance Audio is designed to work with those. So I'd definitely encourage you to explore that online if this is something that interests you. And just finally, I wanted to mention the dissemination of these experiences. Naturally, headphones is currently the most common and the most obvious way for us to be able to experience immersive audio in AR and VR. And we've had all of these amazing visual developments, but not much has happened with headphones in the last decade. But then just in the last 2 years, we've seen all of these incredible devices start coming on the market. And I like to think this is the beginning of a headphone revolution in many ways. I'm very much inspired by this big VR shift. One of the most important things with headphones and these soundscapes is our ability to actually spatialize audio. So naturally, our 360 visual environment is moving with us. So our audio absolutely must move with us as well if we want to feel truly present and immersive. Now, this little demo here is just a simple head tracking patent. So it's showing you how the headphones are acting as spatialized head tracking on your head. And this is actually a patent from 1997. So people have been thinking about this for quite a long time. So the idea of this shift is we want to move from that traditional stereo headphone listening to being immersed in a sphere of sound in exactly the same way we listen in the environment. Now, how many of you have come across Ozix, who's in the VR space? A few people, yeah. So Ozix aren't quite available yet. They did a Kickstarter at the start of last year, and they'll be available very soon. You can still pre-order from their website. These are exceptional headphones, and they're designed to make you feel truly present. It doesn't feel like you're listening through headphones. One of the key things with these is they're using multiple drivers. So it's like having a surround sound speaker array inside these headphones. So it's creating that shift, making you feel like you're in that sphere of surround sound. Now, I'm not sure how clearly you'll be able to read that, but this is just the key things about these headphones. They calibrate to your ears, so it's giving you a personalized listening experience. And this is one of the biggest things that is starting to shift in a lot of the headphones that are coming on the market. They are actually able to use apps and calibrate to your personal listening, make it feel exactly the same way that you hear the world, which is important. Head tracking, which is the other critical thing, and then the multi-driver element, which I mentioned before. Now, these are probably going to be game-changing in the context of VR, and you might be thinking, well, you know, we've got fantastic headphones with whatever projects you're doing and you don't want to invest in new headphones just yet. Well, there's been a lot of organisations thinking about that, and one of the exciting devices that's coming out from a lot of people is head trackers. So this basically enables you to clip a small head tracker straight onto your headphones and gives that spatialization that you need in the context of particularly an AR app where you're using your phone, but also for VR. So talking about that Amazon rainforest piece, when people are scrolling through those spatial soundscapes using their phone and you're turning your head, it's your phone that's doing the spatialization. So this head tracker actually allows us to be immersed in that environment. Now again, these are quite easy to make. This is a prototype I worked on with Toby Gifford a couple of years ago, and this is a completely solar-powered head tracker from a project we did in Vanuatu, where you're spatializing yourself through field recordings from the Luatin community in Vanuatu. There's a whole range of hardware available that enables you to make these very easily for yourself. And then we've got a number of the key players, again, thinking about how we combine all of these technologies together. So Sennheiser, for example, have released some earbuds just recently that have binaural microphones on them, naturally very good quality headphones for listening, and then integrating that head tracking eventually. So just to close, how am I going for time? Done? Yes, all right. Just to close, I was just going to close by very briefly talking about Aurality, which is the platform that I was going to talk a little bit more in detail about, but I won't. I'll be demoing it later. So this is a new platform for augmented reality audio. It enables you to connect to live audio streams, so listening in real time to the Great Barrier Reef or the Amazon rainforest. I've set up a new demo installation here today, so there's sounds around this building from different marine and actually rainforests and marine environments around the Sunshine Coast, including immersive stories from Lyndon Davis, and there's a little bit of Brent in there as well. So, and that's a taste of an ongoing collaboration that's been happening here on the Sunshine Coast for about 10 years, and we launched that by connecting the entire of Queensland through sound for the Queensland Music Festival this year. So it was stretching the entire coastline, listening to the sounds of Queensland's rivers, rainforests and reefs. I did have a little bit more to say on that, but I might close there, and feel free to come and explore these soundscapes in the demo sessions afterwards. Thank you.